Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. We're unfortunately starting the Festival of Fear off with a book that I've ended up having to DNF, and that book is The Clown Hunt by Judith Sonnet, an extreme horror novel. As this is a DNF, this will not be a review per se. I will, however, do my normal thing of talking about the world building, the characters, and the presentation, and then I'll be going a little bit more deeply into the story. And there will be spoilers in this, with this not being a review, so that's your warning for that. I will keep the warning on screen as well. But before that, just to get some things out of the way, I reached the 70% mark of this book, and I was coping perfectly fine until that point, even though there were some really gruesome scenes in here that made me have to put the book down and then go back to it. But there is one death where I had to close the book, and I will not pick it up again just because of this one specific scene in the book, and we're going to call that the wishbone scene. I will go into more detail about that later on, but it is mentioned in the foreword by another author that that is a death that will live with them for a long time, and they refer to it as the wishbone scene as well. The story is based, or at least the main story begins, in Arkansas. It is a little bit blurry on whether or not they cross the border into one of the adjacent states at any point, but at the beginning of the story, at least, the main character is living and working in Arkansas when things start to go horribly wrong. The prologue takes place 6 years previously, in 2010. The biggest conceit of the main story, however, is that it's 2016 and the killer clown sort of social media epidemic that happened back then is in full swing, with people dressing up as killer clowns, going around pranking people, committing crimes, so on and so forth. Which I know it didn't quite hit us as badly in the UK. I don't know how big a deal it actually was in the USA. If anyone wants to let me know, because genuinely I'm not sure. We had it a little bit over here. But that is sort of the main sort of backdrop for this, and it's based, at least initially, around some pretty sleepy American towns, and they seem to be suffering a little bit with the rise of sort of online shopping, the growth of Amazon, and the sort of slow death of bricks and mortar retail. And that's important when it comes to the main character, who we will touch on in a moment. As far as world building and setting goes, people find clowns creepy, and the idea of tying in a horror novel to this makes complete sense, although this doesn't do what you'd initially think that it does, but we'll talk about that in the spoiler section later on. But that's all I've really got to say about the world building, so now let's jump into the characters. I'm only really going to talk about the primary character in this, and that is the character of Willow, so major spoilers from this point onwards. So Willow, at the start of chapter 1, is having a really bad day. He has just been laid off by his employer at a family-run business, and basically he's looking at everything thinking, right, well, how am I going to cope now? He's in a long-term relationship with someone who's described as very sensitive, but doesn't seem to fetch any wage into the household, and he's also been rejected by his parents. And just for reference here, so Willow is a black American who is also gay. He has put himself through sort of college, and he's paying off the student loans, which are so crippling for everyone. And he makes his way back home to find his other half being orally pleasured by someone who looks to be barely of legal age. So his day is basically going from bad to worse. He then goes to obviously kick his partner out until his partner points out that whilst Willow has been paying the rent for the whole time they were together, the rent is in his name. So he then finds himself kicked out of his apartment, and he ends up in like a Fleabag motel, and he does what, you know, often happens. He decides that what he wants is just, for want of a better term, the term in the book is a pity fuck. Goes off to a local bar and ends up bumping into a pimp. For an amount of money, the pimp sets him up with someone, and afterwards they end up talking, and basically he is offered the opportunity to become a sex worker. This is an opportunity he actually takes up on it, then fast forward several months in the future where he's making a reasonably good living at various truckers, truck stops, servicing various drivers, so on and so forth, as well as other clientele. And through all this, Willow actually comes across as quite a blank canvas in a lot of ways. He's clearly very hard working, he's quite principled, he's very, very independent as well, very understated. But then things go from bad to worse as the story sort of begins to unfold. Now, there are other characters in this. There is his other half and the other half's lover, which, on a note for that one, there is a comment in the text where it's mentioned how young he looks, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm 18," right, as if he'd forgotten that he'd been telling that lie. So there's just a minor little point there. You have the pimp and some of the other sex workers, and then you have the other clowns that appear in the story and the hunters. And to be fair, you kind of end up rooting for Willow because he has such a shitty start to the story. You want things to work out for him. And to be fair, that is pretty solid writing. There are a number of other characters in here, and in many ways they're just fodder for the story. But overall, I think Willow is reasonably well done, although there are some things that happen later on in the story that don't quite make sense that he'd be able to do. Like, for example, firing with very, very high accuracy with crossbows at high speed, but we'll get into that. The presentation of this is actually quite interesting because it uses a couple of different tricks. As already mentioned, you have a prologue which is set 6 years before, and the prologue sets out as if the clowns are going to be the primary antagonist of this story. And there's some really well written creepy imagery, as well as the really, really gruesome stuff, as a number of people get brutalised by this clown at near midnight in this house in the suburbs of Middle America. And what this book does really well is it has a number of illustrations throughout it. Generally speaking, these are after some of the major death scenes, although thankfully not all of them. But the clown one in particular earlier on, the way it mirrors the text where you've got a picture of a toy clown just sat on a bed while the real clown in the text is walking up behind the victim, actually does a really good job of helping to visualise the creepy factor of the title. To then jump multiple years in the future and to have a seemingly normal, everyday sort of situation that's just spiralling a little bit out of control, but still being within the realm of normal, is actually a really interesting way to fetch the tone back down quite a bit, whilst due to the nature of the work he ends up taking off, still maintaining a bit of an edge to it. And it almost gives you like a breathing space post-prologue before all hell breaks loose, not too far into the book, and once that hell breaks loose, it is properly gruesome. So, having mentioned that, I think it's time to get into full spoiler talk about the story. So it isn't clear how the prologue and the main story connect, at the point at least that I reached in the book, although I have a few ideas about that anyway. But basically, at the very beginning, you have a young girl who is 12 or 13 years old walking over on her own at night to her boyfriend's whose birthday it is. They both appear older than they are, and basically they're both like lighting up, smoking some weed, chilling out, and he's after a birthday present, to put it mildly, and that's made perfectly clear. It's also mentioned during their dialogue that there's a creepy man been seen about, which she didn't know about. It's been established that she had highly overprotective parents. So if she'd have known this, she wouldn't have even tried to go out. As they're talking and beginning to get a little bit intimate, the little brother walks down into the basement where they are and says the creepy doll clown is talking, and like the boyfriend basically going, well, there's no toy doll in the house. So he goes up to investigate, and there on the bed is a creepy doll clown that does have some voice capability. Trying to phone the police, and while he's trying to phone the police, there's a clown sneaking up behind him, and that is where the first death occurs. body is thrown down into the basement where the kid brother, who I think is 9, and the girlfriend are, and basically you get a really, really gruesome scene involving him basically pissing in the skull of the dead boyfriend in front of this child. Then you have mutilation and murder of the child, and sexual assault of, is at least implied, of the girl before it fast forwards. If I was to guess, I would say that the girl may well be the instigator of the main story, but that is a guess on my part. I could be wrong. If you've read this, let me know in the comments below. You then jump to the main story, which follows Willow, and as already mentioned, Willow, down on his luck, he's become a sex worker, and the story really begins for the horror side of this when he agrees to take a job from his pimp to be a stripper at a marriage party, and the deal was that the groom could only have the stripper if he was dressed as something that he fears, which is obviously clowns. On the way to the event, they get run off the road by a really beat up looking van with no headlights turned on, no number plate, etc. And they wake up in the back of the van surrounded by a number of other people, a number of which are also dressed as clowns. You have someone who is retired, you have a social media influencer who has been doing these sort of clown sort of tricks on people, you know, jumping out and making people jump, so on and so forth, who is about 13 years old, and sort of his girlfriend and sort of their cameraman, who again are teenagers. You have a husband and wife who are coming back from a concert who are in clown makeup as well. And basically they've all been taken because they're clowns or associated with clowns. They're taken to an area near woodlands, all tipped out and told, giving you a 5-minute head start, there's traps out there, if we catch you we'll kill you, if you get caught we'll do even worse. And that's when it begins, and the first one to die is the old man, who basically stood there standing up for himself saying, look, this is all a joke, this is all very funny, yada yada yada, I'm not a clown, I'm just a normal person who's retired, just let me go. And you get the first truly brutalising scene of the main story there and then, as he just gets eviscerated. And again, after his death you get a rather creepily drawn sort of image of what he looks like afterwards. And the various different hunters that are hunting for these people are very, very clearly slightly unhinged. The leader of the group says very clearly, I am doing this to protect people, and you get the sense that there's some vengeance here and there's a vendetta against clowns, hence why I believe that it's the girl from the prologue. From there you get a number of action scenes as people either fall into traps. For example, you have the typical sort of spike trap that someone falls into. Again, very gruesome descriptions as you would expect. Again, also this included a picture, but the first point where this kind of started to push me a little bit was when they caught one of the social influencers, specifically the cameraman. Basically, he stood in a bear trap and he told the others to run because he realised the noise that was being made was drawing people over, and at this point there was no point in them all dying. Now, Willow had already been separated from the group, had already been caught in a trap, got himself out and managed to kill 2 of the pursuers, and he hears the commotion as well and makes his way over. By the time he gets there, it's too late and the young cameraman is dead, and they've tried to amputate his leg. First of all using a mace and missed and splintered the other leg, and then decided that the good way to remove it would be to use a cheese grater to remove the leg of the still alive 13-year-old boy. And after moving away from the leg, they've then started to cheese grate his stomach, which by this point the kid is obviously dead. Willow does kill the 2 people and then moves on to the next bit, and it's the next scene of deaths that hit me really, really hard, where you have 2 named hunters who, if I remember correctly, are named Lucifer and Beelzebub, although Lucifer might be wrong, and they have caught the couple. Now, at this point, I do want to say what I'm about to describe is not to the same level it is in the book, but I still find this a little bit disturbing, so you have been warned. Upon being caught, they've both been stripped naked. The sort of husband and wife couple pleading for the life, and the wife basically starts pleading because she is 7 months pregnant. And the minute that was mentioned, that set off an alarm bell in my head. Obviously, people are listening to this, and at this point, one of them has a shotgun, one of them has a sword, and they insert the sword through the woman's vagina before pulling it back out again, which is in itself grotesque enough. But then it's followed by them slicing the stomach open, removing the baby, and holding the baby in the air. And the one that's holding in the air is dancing around, chanting wishbone, wishbone, wishbone. And then the two hunters grab either side of the baby and pull in opposite directions, and you have a very grotesque description of how this baby, who's at 7 months gestation, is just eviscerated by being torn apart. And that is the point of this book that I had to stop, and is kind of the reason why I feel the content warning wasn't as extensive as it perhaps should have been, because I am not an overly sensitive person by nature, but that was a step too far for me personally. And up until that point, everything has been really, really gruesome, and there is a lot of harm against children or minors in particular in this, which is already disquieting enough. But again, that scene was enough to make me instantly close the book. I did skip to the very end of the book just to read the epilogue, and it appears at least that Willow had as happy an ending as you could. He has found an apartment in the city. He's obviously deeply traumatized at the end of the title. It seems like he's the last one standing, and he's found a partner who cares for him and genuinely loves him. But then right at the end, there's a scene of a postcard being pushed under a door somewhere from seemingly the same organisation that initiated this clown hunt in the first place, leaving it open to a sequel. So that's the Cliff Notes version of the story up to the point that I've read. I realise there's some really uncomfortable topics in here, but I felt it was important for me to document them. Let's just go on to my final thoughts. Final thoughts then, and up until the point that I had to put the book down, I actually think that as a splatterpunk novel, this was pretty solid. The gore was well written, it was suitably horrifying and shocking, although not to a point that totally turned me off from the book, although did make me have to take a step away a few times. The subversion of the clowns being the hunted ones rather than the hunter was very interesting as well. And the visual presentation with the pictures that linked up to the storytelling added an extra layer to the story. So if you can stomach the really more extreme points of this title and you're a fan of splatterpunk, then you may well like this. For me personally, that one death, the wishbone death, was a step too far for my personal sensibilities. However, because this is a DNF, I am not going to be giving this a rating, but I would like to know if you've read this and how did you find it personally, especially if you are a fan of splatterpunk in particular. I'm really curious how this fares up compared to other titles in the genre. But that said, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all next time.